From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the brand new Fox 8 studios here in New Orleans, welcome into the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, to share, to rate, to review. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here. Andre, it is Monday, a beautiful day in the city. It was a interesting weekend weather-wise in the city, and it was also an interesting weekend news-wise in the city, especially for our purposes. On Saturday, I'm finishing up my workout, about to head on over to Saints camp, and all of a sudden, get the text, Derek Carr retires, dropped everything, and ran on over to Saints camp because I knew then that the weekend had taken a turn. So I worked all weekend. It was a busy, fun, informative, and that's obviously where we have to go with the big picture today. So happy Mother's Day, belated to all the moms out there. Thank you very much for all that you do for us. But of course, that's where we have to go today with our big picture. But before we do that, how was your weekend?
You know, it was going smooth. I remember the day the news dropped, I was actually on my way to Baton Rouge with my wife. I said, you know what, we don't have to worry about anything sports related today. Your sister's graduating, you know, we're going to do this graduation photo shoot. It was going to be awesome. And we had a good time, but definitely on the drive up there, I was like, you know, I might have to take
let me tell you something.
Have to take a quick U-turn.
I thought about it, but I had to anchor all day Saturday, so I was really behind. By the time everything got done, so I was like, I don't have time to pod today, because we almost did that emergency pod.
I was looking for the text.
We were about to do it, but we had all of our shows covered that day, so we decided to wait until Monday morning to do it. That's probably a good thing, because now you can kind of let it settle in. The emotions of it have subsided. But look, I mean, let's just be real. The book is finally closed.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, and frankly, that's what we have to go with the big picture.
Yeah, the big picture. You know, Derek Carr's surprise retirement over the weekend. He calls it quits for now. Whether it stays that way, only time will tell. But as for right now, we know one thing. When the season starts, Derek Carr will not be under center. It'll be Tyler Shuck, Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler. Maybe there will be a mystery fourth quarterback thrown into the mix. We'll see. But the big picture today, Sean, news dropped, Derek Carr's retired. How do we feel about it?
Well, there's a lot of things that we could go with this, because this has been such a bizarre story, such a layered story, and his tenure here has been so, I mean, just so, I guess tumultuous would be the name. It's all over the place for a guy that was here for a relatively short amount of time. But we'll do our best to talk about what happened, how we feel about it, but B, just his tenure / I hate to use the word legacy, but the way his tenure here kind of went in New Orleans. So we'll just start off with this. Derek Carr's days as a Saint are over. As you mentioned, they will have a new starting quarterback in 2025. I know to the Saints fans listening, probably the majority of you are happy about that. This caps off a bizarre chapter in the, frankly, pretty short book, but impactful book of Derek Carr's tenure here in New Orleans, for being honest. He was only here 2 seasons, only played 27 games, but my goodness, did he make some news. So what to make of this whole fiasco is really what it boils down to today for this pod, now that we've been detached for about, a little over 48 hours from the announcement. So first off, clarity was the word we heard pre-draft. Clarity was what they were seeking. Well, clarity was finally achieved. Remember, last week, we sat here in these chairs and we said, look, regardless of what you do with Derek Carr, a clear-cut decision has to be made. This cannot linger over the organization indefinitely, especially with a brand-new head coach, brand-new season, out there just waiting and waiting and waiting. There has to be some form of clarity and, frankly, a firm decision made. A few days later, Saints finally got that final clarity and included the one option, Andre, none of us considered.
Yeah, we never talked about it all.
When I read it, I'm like, I don't know why I never considered this, but none of us considered this at no point throughout this entire process. And all the options we talked about, and I thought we discussed them all, I really did. Did I ever think Derek Carr was truly going to retire? Yet here we are with Carr gone, not on IR, not with a trade, not with a cut, not with a post-June 1st cut designation, but by him hanging up the cleats, chucking up the deuces, and throwing the Saints back $30 million in salary cap relief. Of all the options presented, Andre, all of them, this has to be by far the best one for the New Orleans Saints. No more Carr drama hanging around. No more questions about suspicious timelines, which we have broken down quite a bit on this podcast. It is now all done, and you can add some salary cap relief. Now, this gets a little numbery and a little messy on how that actual 30 gets applied and where the Saints actually see the biggest benefit. But from what I've been able to gather, it's going to be next year. The majority of that cap savings will come, which means, Andre, they could be going into an offseason with significant cap space in the black, not in the red, going into an offseason. But we'll save that for 2026. I had Jeff Duncan with me on the final play last night. I don't know if you saw it. He suggested that this retirement is more of a negotiated financial settlement, which was an interesting way of putting it, like a nice way to end this without it getting messy. Then Ross Tucker of the Ross Tucker podcast posted a clip this morning, which I think Jeff quote tweeted and I retweeted. It suggested that perhaps, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, does a podcast, does some radio, pretty popular podcast in the NFL circles. He kind of suggested that perhaps this was a situation where the Saints told Derek Carr that had he gone on IR or let this hang around or basically collect the money, that the Saints were going to fight it legally. And thus retirement and returning the negotiated portion of that restructure was basically Carr's only realistic choice. Those are two other layers to the quote-unquote retirement. Here's ultimately where I stand with that. Frankly, even if all that is true, I really don't care. I mean, I really don't care if that's the way they had to do it. I really don't care if that's the quote-unquote real story and the retirement is just the name for it. If that was indeed the scenario the Saints had to do by digging in and playing hardball, so be it. The Saints won. The Saints won that battle, and they can finally move on, and so can Derek Carr. As for Carr's legacy, we got to get into this. This is going to be fun. Really depends on who you ask and what city you live in or what city you are in when you ask him. I happened to catch, I don't know if you saw this today or heard this today, I happened to catch Colin Cowherd on the way into work. He had former quarterback Matt Hasselbeck on. Yeah. Both were raving about Derek Carr. I mean, Cowherd, who can be very critical at times, talking about, had he gone to an offensive coach when he first came in and not a dysfunctional organization like the Raiders, he would have had a much better career. He's well respected. Hasselbeck raved about how he handled some very difficult situations. But here was the thing with that discussion. Both of them, Cowherd and Hasselbeck, were heavily referring to Carr's Raider tenure. Yep. And frankly, going to social media right now, overwhelmingly positive if you really look at some of the comments, but it's almost all overwhelmingly positive from Raiders fans. The black and gold behind you, substitute that for silver and black. Other NFL players and a few Saints players as well, all gave some positive reviews of Derek Carr, the player, the man, the teammate, everything. And look, I have repeatedly said this, maybe hard for some in the fan base to believe because of how much they dislike him, but he got along much better with his teammates than I think a lot of people on the outside let on. I think he was a guy that they liked way more than they disliked throughout his tenure, even the short tenure in New Orleans, but certainly with the Raiders. But we have black and gold around us for a reason. This is a Saints pod, okay? This is not a Raiders pod. This is not an NFL pod. We're here to talk about this organization, this team, and frankly, this fan base, the ones that watch this podcast. So let's just do that right now. For as beloved as Carr was with Raider Nation, Black and Silver Nation, or Silver and Black Nation, and respected among NFL peers, he was equally as despised and detested by a strong portion of the Saints fan base here. What the pretty short Derek Carr tenure truly taught me about some of his fan base is there is a segment of this fan base that would rather lose a lot, as in not win a single game with a guy they like, as opposed to lose a lot less and frankly win more with a guy they don't. and stop telling me they hated on him because he followed Drew Brees' footsteps. I think that's an easy out. I think this isn't close. I think he followed Drew Brees isn't close to why he was so hated here. I think that's an element of it, but that's not the main reason because, frankly, he got here 2 years after Drew retired. So it wasn't like he was
technically Jameis followed Drew Brees.
He was not
and they
the
loved
guy
Jameis.
following in his footsteps. Other guys played after Brees and didn't get this level of venom. In fact, Jameis, Taysom, they're all beloved here. They're all beloved. But now, didn't happen with Carr, but now, thankfully, that is over. That storyline is over. We no longer have to consistently analyze this fan base's relationship with this quarterback. We know how they feel. He's gone. Everybody moves on. I'll just say this. This is how I'll kind of put a bow on the Derek Carr era. It really boils down to this for me. Derek Carr was basically a 500 quarterback here. That's how he should be remembered. A 500 quarterback. No better, no worse. Didn't quite live up to the contract he signed, but wasn't nearly the disaster he was made out to be. It is what it is. He came, he played a little bit, won some games, lost some games, ruffled some feathers, and now he's gone. Now we can all move on. What say you?
You know, I think this is the best of both worlds. This is the best possible outcome for every side involved because it became increasingly clear Derek Carr didn't really want to play here. You know, as the offseason went on and, you know, we talked about it a lot on here, it did not seem like Derek Carr exactly was, you know, bleeding black and gold over the last few months. And if you listen to 95% of the fan base, they didn't want him here.
Exactly.
You know, we talked about it. We said if by some miracle Derek Carr was the one who ran out of that tunnel in game one for the New Orleans Saints, you might hear the loudest boos in New Orleans history. And, you know, Derek Carr and the Saints, it was a toxic relationship, and at some point it had to end. And for the longest, we couldn't see a clean end to this, you know, whether it was, you know, cutting Derek Carr, trading Derek Carr, but his retirement is the cleanest ending that we can get.
Smoothest thing you can get.
Exactly. He gets to, you know, focus on your family, focus on healing up, you know, physically. If he wants to get that surgery, if he doesn't want to get it. I know they mentioned, you know, he felt like if he got the surgery, he wouldn't be able to be the same quarterback he was before. He can explore that all he wants to, but it won't be in black and gold. The Saints get to move on. They've got 3 young quarterbacks on the team right now. You know, they get to dive into that, and right now it doesn't seem like any of those 3 are necessarily hated by fans because at this point I think they just wanted anybody who wasn't Carr. I mean, I saw people second lining down the streets over the weekend. I had some friends saying, oh man, I got to throw something on the grill today. You know, the fans are excited. Ironically, the retirement of the starting quarterback has probably brought a level of excitement to the Saints fandom that hasn't been around for a long time because now you know, no matter who starts under center week 1, it'll be a breath of fresh air, whether it's Tyler Shuck, you know, the second-round pick from Louisville, whether it's Spencer Rattler, and we know Spencer Rattler has a section of the fan base who absolutely love and adore him, whether it's him or whether, you know, Jake Hayner shocks the world and somehow takes the job from the both of them. It'll be a breath of fresh air from the Derek Carr situation. And, you know, you mentioned Derek Carr's legacy in New Orleans, and unfortunately, I think his legacy, it won't be a pretty one. You know, he's probably going to go down as one of the most disliked quarterbacks, one of the most disliked players in recent history, you know, whether it's because he wasn't able to get this team to the playoffs, whether it's because the fans don't feel like he embraced the city like, you know, we've seen other players embrace the city, whether it's because he got paid a lot of money and didn't necessarily live up to that contract like you mentioned. There's a lot of reasons why, you know, you could say Saints fans didn't like Derek Carr, but it's over, you know, and I'm glad it's over because if you look back on our YouTube page, you can probably find like 6 of the last 12 topics we've done were probably about Derek Carr. Now it's finally come to an end. We can move forward, figure out, you know, we've got a triple threat battle at quarterback coming up into minicamp, training camp to see who will be the new face of the franchise. So I'm excited to see what's next.
I'm very excited to see what's next, but reality is going to hit, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to, there's going to be a steep learning curve for whoever wins the job next. And look, wins and losses, wins are going to be more difficult to come by now. So there's going to be an interesting dynamic because I think everyone understands that by Derek Carr moving on, it was not the right fit, however you want to put it. It was not, it was time to move on, and that excites the fan base. But at the same time, that same fan base is football savvy enough to understand the job just got harder because now they have 3 inexperienced quarterbacks who have not won a game. That's why when I said what I've learned from the Saints fan base is that they would rather lose literally every single game with a guy they like as opposed to win a little bit with a guy they don't. Well, that's what you're faced with now. You're faced with a quarterback room that has not won a single game in 7 NFL starts. A quarterback room with 7 total NFL starts. We've discussed this. I think it's very, very, very possible that the Saints will entertain the veteran quarterback market. It doesn't have to be right away. It can be, into the offseason after OTAs, into training camp. It doesn't have to be right away. But I think it could even be preseason or even into the regular season just to see how the final cuts shake out. But I think ultimately they will have to eventually turn to that. But now you're in a situation now where you are turning to young, inexperienced guys. The guy that won all the games for you the last 2 years is now gone, and yet the fan base is as happy as they've ever been. I don't know. It's hard for us to compare this to any situation. I know. Was it Kenny Staley went from Oakland Raiders to the Saints back when he played, whatever. But how much one guy can be totally loved with one fan base and then totally hated in another, that needs to be studied, dude, because it's unbelievable how you can fit so well somewhere and then be so like a fish out of water somewhere else amongst the fan base. But the bottom line is we don't have to analyze this anymore. That was one of the weirdest things for me. I don't know if it was for you to have to talk about this intangible dynamic because we know it's not the entire fan base. It's a segment of the fan base. But it's a segment of the fan base that's getting louder, more aggressive, and they just wanted it gone. And then you're trying to really tell the truth on the football aspect, which was 40 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, 14-13 as a record versus, the wide eye, it looked like he didn't belong on the field, 0-7 from Haener and Rattler at times a season ago. And now you're trying to rationalize this as best you can, and you understand that it's just not an easy thing to do. But now they add another player in the mix in Tyler Shuck, a second-round pick, and at least there's a little bit of positivity, and you can kind of sense it when you're out at Saints camp. Like, I don't have to talk about that anymore. And Kellen Moore addressed it. Now he doesn't have to address it again. There was no other. We talked about it last pod. There was no topic that made him more uncomfortable than having to discuss the what if with Derek Carr.
Yeah, and when it comes to the fandom, I think it's almost a weight off your shoulders because I don't think any realistic Saints fan is expecting the Saints to win 10 games next year, no matter who starts. The Rat Pack might think Spencer Rattler can go in and win 10 games. I don't know, but most Saints fans probably don't think that Shuck, Rattler, Haener are going to go win 10 games next year. Because when Derek Carr came here, what was being fed to the fan base was the window's still open.
NFC title.
Exactly.
NFC
Dennis
title.
Allen's here. We've got
his
DA.
guy, yeah.
It's his guy from, his Oakland days. Tom Brady's not in the NFC South anymore. It's a very winnable division, which it was. The Bucs won it with 9 wins and 8 wins over the last 2 years. But the Saints weren't able to obviously top that. But I think when Carr got here, the expectation was we should be a playoff team. They were not a playoff team, and I think that's where a lot of the disappointment comes from. Now, as we move into the post-Carr era, whether it's Shuck, whether it's Rattler, whether it's Haener, I think the fans know that this is a rebuilding effort now.
Well, regardless, the reset's here. Me and Jeff talked about this. Even if they don't want to call it that, the reset is here. You move on from an established veteran in Derek Carr, or he moves on, however you want to phrase it, and you turn to 3 young guys, and at best, a veteran journeyman in the locker room at some point. The reset is here. Yeah. And that this organization hasn't necessarily been faced with that reality. They've been trying to hold on to that last little bit of it for a while. I think ultimately the reset has now officially got here. So 2025 is going to be interesting because it's been a long time since we've seen an organization and, frankly, a fan base go into a year thinking, yeah, we understand the situation here. we don't expect to win a lot of games because honestly, how could you right now expect this team to win 8, 9, 10 games?
Yeah, I mean, you're going into it with whoever you start, it's a guy who doesn't have a lot of experience, and we've talked about the lack of weapons around them as well, especially playmakers on this team. So especially, we still don't know what's going on with Taysom. The wide receiver room is very one-dimensional. So I don't see any way that the Saints come out, and the schedule comes out Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'm sure we get to look at and analyze when they play the teams on the schedule. But I mean, I look at this team and I see about 5 or 6 wins right now, and I mean, that's fine. What this season is about coming up, what will Tyler Shuck or Spencer Rattler show you? Because it's a very short window that they have, because if you do go out and win 3, 4, 5 games next year, you're going to have a top 5 pick, and you're going to have maybe Arch Manning coming out. You're going to have Garrett Nussmeier, the son of the Saints' new offensive coordinator, coming out next year. So the Saints need to see, do we have a starting quarterback? Do we have a potential face of the franchise in these 3 young guys in the locker room? Because if we don't, we may be in a good position to address that next season. Or will Tyler Shuck show enough? All a la, and Bryce Young was a number 1 overall pick, but, Bryce Young goes out there, he struggles his rookie year, but the Panthers felt they saw enough from him to continue to build around him and to not replace him. Tyler Shuck was drafted in the 2nd round, so you don't have as much attached to him, but if he can show you something and play well, and they still only win about 6, 7 games, then you start looking at, okay, well, what receivers are out there? What running backs are out there? How can we build around this guy? But the Saints only have 18 weeks to figure it out.
And that may be the prevailing storyline all season that usurps wins and losses is, okay, is Tyler or Spencer going to prove themselves enough to be the franchise guy to bypass a quarterback again the following year? Because if they're picking in the top 10 again next year, then they're going to have a really interesting decision to make. Speaking of Tyler Shuck,
yes,
I saw him Saturday. We were out there at Saints Rookie Minicamp. This is where we were going to go with this podcast today with Saints Rookie Minicamp. I had a bunch of notes. I was writing a lot of stuff down. So all eyes were on Tyler Shuck at Saints Rookie Minicamp. Let me just say this for the record. It was a very light workload. It was they had they didn't have any team periods, 11-on-11. They had one 7-on-7 session. That was the only competitive stuff they did all day. So it was a lot of drills, a lot of routes on air, a lot of individual position work. I don't even think they had one-on-ones. So it was very light work, at least in terms of what we were able to see on Saturday. Again, they practiced. They got there Thursday and it lasted through Sunday. So, but I will also be fair and say this. In the limited sample size we saw, you can physically see the live arm talent. You can see it. The ball just comes off his hand differently. There were 3 throws that I logged. I tweeted about this after practice, so check it out if you haven't. But there were 3 throws that I saw during 7-on-7. I was like, oh, wow, okay, yes, that's a good throw. There was a deep sail route where he's on the opposite hash to Michael Jacobson, was about 15 yards downfield from your lineup from that wide tight end spot. You run that deep sail route to the sideline. So he threw it from one hash to the opposite boundary. He threw a deep comeback route to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who, by the way, signed with the Saints, according to Jeremy Fowler today. The veteran receiver, he was out there. It was a deep comeback, 15 to 18 yards. That receiver really digs in, comes back. You really got to drive it. I mean, the ball came off his hand. Nice, plays pretty well. Again, 7-on-7, again against rookies. And then obviously, well, not obviously, this was the last one I saw was the kind of a cover 2 hole shot where those 2 safeties split and there's that underneath cornerback defender, but he's in zone. So there's that little void between the corner and safety where you got to groove it in. You got to throw it hard, but you can't just rifle it because it can get away from you throwing that distance. But hit it on the money to a receiver kind of up the rail in that little void about 15 to 18 yards downfield. Those are the 3 plays that I starred. Went 7 of 8 during 7-on-7s. So all in all, I thought it was a positive first impression on the field. And he spoke to us in the media after, and you can feel the maturity. There's an ease about him, says the right things. So he's checking a lot of boxes early on, but let me reiterate, it is early on, and it was all rookies. It wasn't all the entire team there yet.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you what you want to see from somebody at this stage. You want to see him able to, get the fans excited, because if he went 2 for 8, with 3 interceptions, that would be the prevailing story. Tyler Shuck comes into rookie minicamp, looks like he's not ready. So, being able to step in with rookies, guys who he is a lot more experienced than, because we talked about it. He spent a lot of time in college. I mean, he was in the same high school class as Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. So he's coming in with guys who he has played more than, and that's been the big thing with Shuck. His age is a good thing, not a bad thing. That's what Kellen Moore and all the coaches and the GM have said. His age is a good thing because of the experience that he's been able to rack up. So getting in rookie camp, it's good to see that experience paying off. Now as they head into mini camp in a couple weeks, we'll see what it looks like when he's with the rest of the team, and we'll see what he looks like next to a Spencer Rattler, who Kellen Moore mentioned he expects to take a big jump from year 1 to year 2.
I'll just say this, it's my first, we talked to him in the Zoom after. I know Juan did the Zoom with him a couple weeks ago, and then I was up close in the media pack we had with him inside the locker room. You can really feel the maturity just in terms of the way he kind of carries himself. There's a likability to him. There's an ease about his demeanor that I think you can understand why people tend to gravitate to him. Says the right things. He talked about the Dragos thing, and he talked about busting up his tire in the one of our fantastic New Orleans streets here. So he has truly been initiated into New Orleans culture. And you can sense that maturity, which is obviously a good thing. It was probably one of the things they liked in a weak class. At least they got the most quote-unquote mature player at that position. And that maturity is going to be leaned on because, frankly, he might have to start a lot more this season than perhaps you would want a rookie to start. But here he is, away they go with Tyler Shuck. So I'm very curious to see how this works out. OTAs next Thursday. First opportunity to see him with the rest of the team.
Yeah, it seems like he's kind of winning over the fan base, because this was a fan base that wasn't thrilled with the pick when it first happened. So it seems like he's kind of started to win them over with some of his early comments in the black and gold, and now we'll see where it goes from here.
We'll see where it goes from here. It's been an interesting few days. It always seems to be. I'm sure more news is coming our way at some point. But for now, the Derek Carr chapter is closed. A new quarterback will be here in 2025. We'll see who that quarterback ultimately ends up being. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.